Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Audit Committee to order, please. Michelle, are there any public speakers?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one member of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask that the public speaker adhere to the MTA's rule of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speaker that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers at all committee meetings, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remark. Our only speaker is Jason Anthony.
Good afternoon, Audit Committee. Good afternoon, Jason Anthony here from the ALU. Since this is the Audit Committee, we should talk about doing audit for every single budget of every single agency, because like Bob Ferran, our beloved friend Bob Ferran, will regularly say fiscal cliff. And our friends across the Hudson already sounded the alarm regarding going against congestion pricing. And here's why. Our friends that crosses the Lincoln Tunnel and Holland Tunnel, they pay $16 when we cross from New York to Jersey. And us, with congestion pricing, we will have to pay up to $23. We should consider what we spend in our beloved Metropolitan Transportation Authority, better known as the MTA. When we do business trips, we should consider utilizing less our car fleet and utilizing public transportation. Let's say if we are within the 5 boroughs, we should utilize the subway. If we are in the outer boroughs, in other words, within the region, we should use the commuter rails. So I'll see you guys in finance.
Thank you. This concludes our public speakers.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the minutes for the July 25th meeting. May I have a motion? A second? Thank you. And a vote? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Michelle, are there any changes to the work plan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the 4th and final audit committee for 2022. There are no changes to the work plan this month. The proposed 2023 work plan is included in the committee materials for information purposes, and any proposed changes will be presented for approval at the January meeting.
Thank you. Jill Strohmeyer from Deloitte is here to present the results of their review of the MTA consolidated financial statements for the second quarter of 2022. Jill?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Deloitte is currently in the process of completing our quarterly review procedures of the MTA's consolidated interim financial statements as of and for the 6-month period ended June 30th, 2022. A review of the interim financial information consists primarily of analytical procedures and making inquiries of management responsible for financial and accounting matters. It is substantially less in scope than an audit, the objective of which is the expression of an opinion on the financial information. So we're not issuing an opinion on the financial statements, an audit opinion on the financial statements. But based on our reviews at this time, we are not aware of any material modifications that should be made to the interim financial statements for them to be in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, or GAAP. These financial statements are consistent with prior quarters and prior year financial statements as well. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding our reviews.
Great. Are there any questions? May I then have a motion to accept the second quarter 2022 MTA consolidated financial statements? Thank you. A second? Thank you. And a vote? Great. The second quarter 2022 MTA consolidated financial statements are accepted. Now, for the appointment of the external auditors. This is the first year of the new external audit contract between MTA and Deloitte that was awarded earlier this month. As part of the annual reappointment process, the committee requires the auditors to present to the committee the results of the most recent inspection of the firm that was conducted by the PCAOB, or the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. We have a copy of the 2020 report that was issued September 2021, and Jill will briefly explain the contents. Jill?
Yes. So Deloitte's latest PCAOB report is on page 149 of your materials today. And due to the fact that Deloitte is registered with the PCAOB and performs audits of publicly traded companies every year, the PCAOB is required to inspect the audit working papers prepared by Deloitte, in support of those audits. The PCAOB reviews the work papers to determine whether Deloitte has followed the appropriate auditing standards, the PCAOB rules, as well as our own internal Deloitte policies and procedures. During the 2020 inspection, 53 public issuers were reviewed by the PCAOB, and 2 of those audits were given comments. So out of 53, only 2 were awarded any comments. The comments that were given out related to testing and controls over revenue and related accounts. I do want to point out that the 2020 results from the PCAOB were improved over 2019, in which there were 6 audits that had comments. So we have 2 in the 2020 reporting year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions around the PCAOB reports.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jill. Any questions or comments about the PCAOB report or the reappointment of Deloitte as MTA's independent auditor? Okay, good. We need a motion to appoint Deloitte as the MTA's external auditors. Can I have thank you. A second? Great. And a vote? Great. Deloitte is appointed at MTA's external auditors for the audit of the year and 2022 financial statements. Continuing with Deloitte, Jill will tell us about their audit approach to the 2022 year-end audits of MTA financial statements and that of its agencies. Jill will also discuss any new or proposed changes in accounting principles, regulations, or financial reporting practices and its impact to the financial statements. Jill?
There we go. Thank you. The members of the committee should have received a separate handout on Deloitte letterhead. This is our audit work plan for the 2022 audits. It's not in your materials in the book. And I will take you through that presentation this afternoon. I want to start on page 4 of that presentation, going over Deloitte's leadership team. So in addition to myself, to my right, I have Kostas Makrakis, who's an audit managing director with Deloitte, who leads several of our agency audits here at the MTA, including MTA Bus, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad. In addition to Kostas and myself, we have a very seasoned team of Deloitte professionals serving the MTA again this year. Senior Manager Darshan Patel, who will return as our single audit compliance specialist, responsible for testing your federal award monies. We have 2 managers, John Fry and Casey Smith, who will be responsible for the audits of the employee benefit plans of the MTA. And Patricia Zarita, John Hughes, and Mike Tartaglia are our key senior managers and managers who will oversee the agency's financial statement audits. In addition to that core team, we have a number of specialists that we have on our team related to IT, information technology, OPEB, pensions, and accrued judgments and claims. And then finally, supporting Kostas and I are our advisory partner, Kevin Richards, and our second level concurring review partners, Kathleen Candela and Elaine Reyes. This team is all of the team members here on page 4 have served the MTA either in a prior year or for several years, actually. Moving to page 6. Page 6 talks about our risk assessment. So each year, As part of the start of our audit, Deloitte team goes through a risk assessment process to identify what areas we will be testing for the current year. The pyramid in the middle of the page, I think really does show a nice layout of where we're going to spend our time. The top of the pyramid is where we'll spend most of our time, which is management override of controls. This is our one significant risk area for the audit. It's the same significant risk we've had in prior years as well. And the reason management override is a significant risk is just due to the unique position management is in to potentially perpetuate fraud or direct a fraudulent entry to be recorded. And so for every audit that Deloitte performs, management override of controls is considered a significant risk. And we spend time testing journal entries, asking questions of management, understanding any unusual transactions that may have occurred during the year, whether or not there was any bias on the part of management in developing key estimates. Those are some of the procedures that we'll perform to address this significant risk. The second layer of the pyramid is our areas that are considered maybe higher risk but not significant risk. So we'll spend quite a bit of time in these areas. They relate to COVID-19 funding that may have been received in the current year. Areas that have judgments or management used as an expert, pension, OPEB liabilities, and accrued judgment and claims areas are where we spend quite a bit of time, and we also bring specialists to help us test those areas. Construction work in progress, we'll spend some time there as well, just making certain that any projects that may have been completed get transferred to capital assets and depreciation begins timely. And the last area in this category relates to leases. The MTA is going through a rather significant accounting pronouncement adoption this year related to GASB statement number 87 and leases. It's going to, for the first time, bring certain lease agreements to the balance sheet that have never been recorded before. So leased assets, lease liabilities, lease receivables, and some deferred inflows will all be recorded for the first time on the MTA's financial statements. The next layer is our lower risk area, so areas that we will spend time on during our audit, but less time than the top two layers, revenues, cash, investments, long-term debt, other capital assets, accrued expenses. And the last layer is a layer where we'll spend some time, but not as much time as the previous three layers. We'll do some inquiries with management, we'll do some analytical procedures, but we'll likely not go into detailed testing just because in our professional judgment, there's little to no risk in these areas. And we have come up with this pyramid based on understanding the business, having conversations with management, our industry knowledge, things that we've learned from prior years, understanding macroeconomic and the political environment. Moving to page 9, while we do not plan to rely on the work of internal audit, we do have conversations with internal audit. We do review internal audit's reports each year. It's an important part of our process in determining our risk assessment program and where we'll spend time during our audit. We will also use third parties as part of our engagement this year. These third parties relate to minority-owned, women-owned, and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses who will be part of our audit team in testing various account balances. In addition to the specialists I've mentioned related to pension, OPEB, and claims, we also have specialists that will help, data analytics specialists that will help us review journal entries, and we will have a specialist on the team related to the lease implementation. Page 10 outlines our audit timeline, when we'll be on-site performing procedures. It's very similar to prior years, with May being our anticipated issuance of our auditor's report on your financial statements. Page 11 outlines all the reports that we will issue. And again, this is the same as in prior years. And finally, page 16, under the auditing standards and government auditing standards, I do have to just provide this committee with our peer review report, our latest peer review report, which is from 2020. Grant Thornton is Deloitte's peer reviewer. Every 3 years, Grant comes in and reviews audits of private companies. So my earlier presentation, I spoke about publicly traded companies and the PCAOB. Grant Thornton comes in and reviews Deloitte's private companies, and this report was a result of that review, and I'm pleased to present that Deloitte received the highest rating of pass. And one more note on that, and Grant Thornton will be in this year to do their next review of Deloitte's private company audits, and that report should be issued probably within the next year. And that concludes my prepared remarks on our 2022 audit plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That was great, Jill. Thank you. Are there any questions?
One that I'm not sure, since accounting is not my thing, but when you were going over the pyramid and we're speaking about management and override of controls, wouldn't accounts payable and expenses also fall under that? Because I see that's on tier 3, the yellow versus up on top. Or am I just reading it incorrectly?
So management override of controls is really pervasive and covers all areas of the financial statements because management has the ability to override any type of entries made for any account balance, which would include accounts payable and accrued expenses. But the actual testing of that particular line item in the financial statement, we've assessed as a lower level of risk. You're
Good,
welcome.
that makes sense. Okay, on to the audit committee charter. For the record, the committee has been provided with a copy of the charter to review and assess the adequacy of the audit committee charter. The committee members were asked to provide any comments or recommendations to revise the charter prior to this meeting, and no such recommendations were received. Therefore, based on our review, the committee recommends no changes to the charter at this time. So next we have Lamont Kearse, the MTA Chief Compliance Officer, who will give a brief update on the implementation status of prior audit recommendations. Lamont?
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think we have a quick presentation we can throw up on the screen. Very brief. So, MTA Corporate Compliance continues to monitor the implementation of recommendations pursuant to the request of this committee. The actual presentation is in your book since it's not on the screen, so I'll run through it very quickly. We are monitoring the trending closures by quarter. We did notice in the third quarter of 2022 that there was a slight decline in the number of remediation plans that were closed. At this point, we're not overly concerned. It does seem to be a bit of a blip, but if that trend continues, we will definitely bring that to the attention of this committee. We've noticed that we have, in terms of remediation plans, we have 124 remediation plans that the agencies and their various departments have indicated that they have implemented and are awaiting approval on the closure of those remediation plans by compliance and audit services. We have provided the committee a report on 6 months past due remediation plan by agency and priority. A large number of those are currently pending with headquarters and C&D. We've also provided a report which breaks down those remediation plans that are 6 months past due based upon those that are of the highest priority. There are a total of 32 of those. The majority of those are sitting with MTA HQ in terms of the area and technology, as well as MTA C&D and delivery. And compliance continues to work with both areas to get those closed out as quickly as possible. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Did you give them a timeline? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Thank you, Lamont. Yeah, any
Thank you.
questions? You have
I think
questions?
there was.
Keep forgetting to use this thing. For the ones that are over 6 months and 32 of them on the high priority, is there like a timeline that you give them a set date to complete it?
Well, that means they're already past the date. So we're reporting on those that are already past due. So those 32 are past due the date that they were supposed to be implemented.
So now what? What happens with that? I mean,
So we work with them. We work with audit services to try to get them implemented. We provide them with, I don't want to call it encouragement that we will bring these issues to this committee. And we will provide the committee with a report on those that are continually past due. But some of these issues, and again, there's a variety of reasons. I don't want to just say they're not doing it because that wouldn't be fair. Some of it was impacted by transformation, and that needs to be addressed. Some of these are technology issues that are frankly, things have changed, right? You implement the recommendation today, things have changed. And I know Michelle's group often goes back and does a new audit when things have changed to kind of bring things up to date. So there is a process by which we are continually working with them. Our role is to kind of be an assistant, but with a very strong, gentle hand.
So just more specifically, so for every internal audit and every internal audit recommendation, the auditors work with management to determine when it can be implemented. So we don't just have an arbitrary date. The date is at the time of the audit report being issued when management believes they'll be able to implement that recommendation. What we saw particularly during COVID, there were a lot of things that were put on hold, just from logistical standpoint and where we had people and where we had our efforts. So we're a little bit management's a little bit behind right now in implementing some of the recommendations. But for every recommendation, we will relook at it to make sure that it still makes sense. Is it still applicable? Like we just went through transformation, bodies have moved around, and so we make sure the recommendations don't just go away. They follow the appropriate party who's responsible now. But that's what's happening with some of the delays. But we will continue to follow up, and if it is no longer applicable, we will close it out. But it has to they can't close it out. It has to come to us, and we have to agree that it's not applicable any longer.
Right. We've established a two-party approval. Both compliance and audit has to agree that it's actually been implemented. But on the front end, we also always remind the departments, be reasonable and honest in your expectation about when this can be implemented when you're working with audit. Because at some point, compliance will come back to you and say, well, you didn't do it. So.
thank you.
Yes, Sharif?
Thank you very much. Just a question about the technology piece. I see here, 15 outstanding, far and away the highest. And I of course appreciate your comment about things changing, technology evolving, et cetera. But 15, how do we assess sort of the nature of this 15 in terms of degrees of severity? Is this more akin to software updates or something more of a critical nature that really impedes operations? Because I think 15, 6 months past due, quite a high number.
So I noticed one of the things that we've noticed, at least in the technology area, is that there was, prior to the changes that we've made, I will call it a lack of ownership. So say, for example, the recommendation is that compliance comes up with a new system to track and monitor audit recommendations. Well, who owns that? Does compliance own that, or does technology own that? And I think for some of these, you would see there was, for a long time, kind of a lack of ownership. So we've been working with RAF and the departments to kind of put this somewhere, which is now sitting for the most part with technology to get some of these things implemented. Right, I think a lot of these that you will see kind of relate, and I can give you an actual list instead of just kind of giving you a broad list because we do have that information. A lot of them, relate to making modifications in systems or developing new systems going forward. I think a lot of them you'll see those 15 fall into that category. I don't think any of these will be system stoppers. I don't think any of these are, significant cybersecurity risks that will, undermine, our data. But they are those kind of things that are out there. But I think the best thing that I can do is give you an actual list of what they are, what the recommendations are, and the status, and I will provide that for you.
That would be helpful, Milan. Thank you.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions? Okay, next, I have a 4-page draft report that covers the activities of the Audit Committee during the 12 months ended July 31st, 2021. A draft of this report was circulated to you for your review and comments last week. Any questions or suggestions? Okay, then may I have a motion to approve this report for submission to the full board? Yes, thank you. A second? Thank you. A vote to submit to the full board? Thank you. The draft report will be finalized and submitted to the board. Now, pursuant to Section 105(1) of the New York State Public Officers Law, the Audit Committee will go into executive session. We need a motion to go into executive session. Thank you. A second? A vote? Thank you. Okay. Session, thank you. Received a briefing during executive session from MTA IT on the security of sensitive data in accordance with New York State Public Officers Law. Now we need a motion for the Audit Committee to adjourn. Second, thank you. And a vote? Thank you. The Audit Committee is adjourned. Thank you very much.